Something major is happening in the Armstrong camp, and the details are only just beginning to surface. What started as one of the most exciting announcements Matt Armstrong had made in years has now turned into one of the most uncertain situations his channel has ever faced. The Miami workshop plan, something that fans have been eagerly waiting for, is now sitting on shaky ground. And the person who put it there is none other than Tony Armstrong himself. Matt's dad has stepped in, made a decision, and that decision is now casting a long shadow over everything that was supposed to move forward. To understand why this matters so much, you have to understand what the Miami plan actually represented. This was not just about opening a new location or expanding a business. For Matt, Miami was the next chapter. It was a place where the biggest builds, the rarest cars, and the most ambitious projects were going to come together under one roof. The Bugatti Chiron Per Sport project had already brought Matt to Miami. The energy was there. The vision was there. Everything seemed to be pointing in the right direction. And then Tony made his move. Now, the question everyone is asking is simple. Why did he do it? What did Tony see that made him pull the trigger on a plan that looks so promising from the outside? And more importantly, can the situation still be turned around before it is too late? To answer those questions properly, you have to go back to the beginning and understand exactly what Tony and Matt's relationship is built on, because that foundation explains everything. Most people who watch Matt's content see a father and son who work well together. They see the easy back-and-forth conversations, the calm guidance Tony offers during difficult moments, and the genuine warmth between two people who clearly trust each other. What they do not always see is the history behind that relationship, and that history is what makes Tony's recent decision so significant. Tony Armstrong did not become involved in Matt's journey because it was convenient or because he wanted to be on camera. His involvement came from a lifetime spent working in garages, developing skills the old-fashioned way, through experience, repetition, and a deep respect for the mechanical world. Long before Matt's channel had a single subscriber, Tony was already someone who understood cars at a level that most people never reach. That knowledge, built over decades of hands-on work, became the backbone of everything Matt eventually created. When Matt was still figuring things out, still balancing part-time jobs and building his early projects on a limited budget, Tony was a steady presence in the background. He was not handing out money or doing the work for his son. He was providing something harder to replace, which was guidance rooted in genuine understanding. When something went wrong, Tony helped diagnose it. When a decision had to be made, Tony offered perspective. When Matt felt uncertain, Tony stayed calm. That pattern repeated itself so many times over so many years that it became the natural rhythm of how they worked together. This is important to understand because Tony's involvement in the Miami situation is not coming from a place of interference. It is coming from that same instinct that has always driven him, the instinct to look carefully at a situation before committing fully to it. And what he appears to have seen in the Miami plan has given him serious reason for concern. To appreciate why Tony's reaction carries so much weight, it helps to understand the scale of what Matt was planning. The Miami workshop was never a small idea. It was designed to be a full-scale operation capable of handling the kinds of projects that simply cannot be done in a standard garage environment. Cars like the Bugatti Chiron Per Sport, which only around 60 units were ever produced, require a completely different level of infrastructure, tooling, and expertise. The Miami location was supposed to provide all of that. The plan had been building quietly for some time. Matt's trip to Miami to inspect the damaged Bugatti in person was not just a casual visit. It was a reconnaissance mission. He was seeing whether the location, the resources, and the overall environment could support the kind of operation he had in mind. From everything that followed, it seemed like the answer was yes. The energy around the idea grew. Updates started pointing toward a real commitment, and the audience could sense that something significant was on the horizon. But behind that excitement, there were questions that had not yet been answered. Setting up a high-level workshop in a city like Miami is an entirely different challenge compared to operating out of a familiar garage in Leicester. The logistics alone are complex enough. Add to that the financial investment required, the challenge of sourcing parts for rare vehicles in a new market, and the pressure of managing operations from a distance, and the picture becomes far more complicated than it might appear on a screen. Tony saw all of this, and based on what has emerged, He did not feel that the plan had been fully worked through before the commitment was made. That concern, coming from someone with the level of experience Tony has, is not something that can simply be dismissed. When Tony made his move, it was not dramatic or public in the way that some might expect. That is not his style. Anyone who has watched enough of Matt's content knows that Tony is not someone who makes a lot of noise. He does not perform for camera. He does not look for attention. He shows up, he works, he says what needs to be said, and then he steps back. So when he decided to step in on the Miami plan, it happened in the measured and direct way that has always defined how he operates. The decision he made was to put the brakes on the forward movement of the plan. This was not a flat-out refusal to support Matt's vision. It was something more considered than that. Tony effectively said that before anything else moves forward, certain things need to be addressed. The foundation has to be more solid. The risks need to be understood more clearly. The planning has to catch up with the ambition. For Matt, this was not an easy thing to hear. When you've been building towards something, when you can already see the shape of what it could become, being told to slow down feels like a step backward, even when it is actually a step toward doing things properly. The frustration in that situation is real, and it is completely understandable. But Tony's reasons were not coming from a place of doubt about Matt's ability. They were coming from a place of experience that recognizes exactly what can go wrong when the excitement of a big idea moves faster than the preparation behind it. This is where the tension between them became something that fans started to notice. The warmth and ease that normally defines their dynamic was still there, but underneath it, there was a real disagreement about how to move forward. That disagreement between someone driven by ambition and energy and someone guided by experience and caution is one that plays out in many partnerships. The difference here is that both people involved genuinely respect each other, and that respect is what makes the situation more complicated rather than simpler. The Miami workshop plan was not just a personal goal for Matt. It was tied directly to the future direction of his content. The projects he had been taking on in the final months of 2025 made it clear that he was operating at a level that required more than what his current setup could reliably provide. The Bugatti Chiron per sport alone pushed those limits to a point that was very difficult to manage. Sourcing parts for a car with only around 60 units ever produced is not something that can be done casually. Every component requires precise knowledge and the right connections, and not having the right base of operations makes that even harder. Beyond the Bugatti, there was also the crashed Ferrari F43 that Matt had picked up around July of the same year. This car, which had previously been used as a rental vehicle before being involved in a crash, brought its own set of challenges. A car that has passed through many different drivers and then been damaged carries a level of unpredictability that demands careful and methodical attention. The plan to restore it while also installing a Capristo exhaust system meant that the rebuild had to balance restoration with genuine improvement, all while respecting the original character of the car. That kind of work, done properly, needs the right environment. The Miami workshop was supposed to be that environment, a dedicated space where these high-level projects could be managed properly, where the right tools and infrastructure would be available, and where the growing ambition of the channel could find a physical home. Without that, the projects become harder to manage, the risks increase, and the standard that Matt has been working toward becomes more difficult to maintain. Tony's intervention, however well-intentioned, has put all of that into question. The short answer is yes, but not in the form it currently exists. If the plan is going to move forward in a way that actually works, it needs to be rebuilt on a foundation that addresses the concerns Tony has raised. That means going back to the details, asking the harder questions about logistics and finances and long-term sustainability, and making sure that the ambition of the idea is matched by the preparation behind it. This is not as exciting as simply pushing forward. It does not make for the kind of dramatic announcement that gets immediate attention, but it is the kind of work that determines whether something lasts or whether it collapses under the weight of its own ambition. The projects Matt has been taking on, the rare Bugatti, the crashed Ferrari, the level of complexity he has been consistently stepping into, all of them require a base that can actually support what is being built on top of it. Tony's intervention, as uncomfortable as it might feel in the short term, may be exactly what the Miami plan needs to eventually succeed. The best outcomes in this kind of work rarely come from moving fast. They come from moving carefully, from being honest about what is missing, and from being willing to slow down when slowing down is the right thing to do. What everyone watching the situation wants to know is simple. What happens now? Does the Miami plan get quietly shelved? Does it get redesigned from the ground up? Does the tension between Matt and Tony resolve itself the way their on-screen disagreements usually do, with a calm conversation and a practical solution? Or does this represent something deeper, a genuine turning point in how the channel operates and what it is willing to take on? Based on everything that has been shown over the years, the most likely outcome is that this gets worked through the same way everything else has been. Not quickly, not without difficulty, but with the same honest effort that has defined the Armstrong approach from the very beginning. Tony does not stay in the background because he is uninvolved. He stays there because he understands that his role is to support, not to control. And Matt does not push forward on ambition alone. He has shown time and again that he is willing to learn from the people around him. The Miami plan is not dead, but it is not what was a few weeks ago either. Something has shifted, and that shift matters. It matters because it is real, because it reflects the kind of genuine friction that any serious partnership eventually faces, and because how it resolves will shape everything that comes after it. At its core, this situation is not really about Miami. It is not about a workshop or a business plan, or even a Bugatti Chiron per sport sitting in a city far from home. It is about two people who have built something genuinely valuable together, now facing one of the harder tests that kind of partnership eventually brings. It is about experience and ambition sitting in the same room and trying to find a way forward that honors both. Tony pulling the trigger on the Miami plan was not an act of opposition. It was an act of care. It was the same instinct that led him to offer guidance during those early builds, to stay calm when things went wrong, and to show up consistently over years of shared work. He is not trying to stop Matt from reaching the next level. He is trying to make sure that when Matt gets there, the ground beneath him is solid enough to build something that lasts. Whether that is how Matt sees it right now is another question. But if the history of their relationship tells us anything, it is that these two have always found a way to come back to the same place, working side by side, each bringing what the other cannot, and doing something together that neither of them could do alone. That is not the kind of foundation that falls apart easily. And whatever happens with Miami, that foundation is still there. The journey continues, and it is worth watching closely.